Welcome to another episode of Wins Notes. This is episode 18, and we're still rolling. Anyway, if you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Winslow. I'm a musician, drum and bass producer, DJ, middle school music teacher, a lot of other labels and stuff. But I guess it all sums up into just a creative type person. And this is my podcast. Why just talk about things? Podcast. It is a podcast. What is that for? Why just talk about stuff that's on my mind? Maybe updates as what I've been up to music-wise, and just kind of chatting about ideas and stuff that you guys present me, the listeners, in the comments and stuff, and just kind of sharing my thoughts about things. As usual, I'm one person. I'm one set of ideas and experiences. But if you're anything like me, you like listening to other people's experiences, ideas, thought processes, because it helps you figure out your own. There's so many different ways to approach things. So that's why I like making these, because I know it at least benefits one of you to, maybe hear some reassuring thoughts or anything related to what you're up to. So before we get going, some housekeeping things. Follow, like, all that stuff if you feel so inclined to. If you want to support the show and keep up with new episodes as they happen. There also is a video component to this, which is just me flapping my gums in front of a camera. But it's on YouTube, youtube.com/WinslowXYZ. Link in the show notes, whatever platform you're listening on. It's one thing to hear someone say something, and it's another added dimension to see them say it and all the stupid facial expressions I make. So yeah, feel like you're in the room. Stick me on the big screen. I'm just another friend in your house, apartment, wherever you are. So lastly, but not least, if you want the most direct way to support me, the show, everything I do is through Patreon. That's patreon.com/WinslowXYZ. I'm really good at reading this stuff out now. But yeah, if you want some to get, support me directly and get some things back in return, such as like hearing these episodes before they happen, bonus episodes about, go further in on certain topics and things like that, or just, other things, music related stuff like mixes, downloads, and tunes that no one else gets to hear or doesn't get to hear early and things like that. It's there, link in the description, show notes. It's, I appreciate anything, but if you want another step of support, Patreon's always there. So this episode comes from a question I got on Twitter from Audible2, who asks, says they'd love to see an episode talking about finding a balance between making music that is original but still fits into the scene, DJ sets, labels, etc. As a newbie, this is something that has me absolutely stumped, and as someone with experience, this is not part of the question, this is me too. But I feel like I have a pretty good idea, because I've honestly talked about this, and I think about this all the time. And my latest EP, if you haven't listened to it, the Thinking of You EP, it's out now. I talked about it in previous episode with the commentary and stuff, but like, it's not wildly different, but it's different enough that it could be not controversial. Maybe that's not the usual controversy. Like, it's not like, oh, it's different, but it's like, it's drum and bass, but it's in a fresh kind of context that you can only really get from me. Not saying I'm the only one that can do it or has done it, but it's like, I'm the only Winslow. I can try my hardest to be Perez, but Perez is Perez. You know what I mean? I always use him as an example, but it's kind of that idea. So basically what I'm talking about is, from my point of view, how you can make room for yourself within this scene. Or honestly, this applies to any genre or any creative thing. It's seeing what's there, what is there, what has been there, thinking about what it could be, and then considering what you want and trying to find a blend between the two. I talked about last episode, like specifically with my last tunes, like Thinking of You with track. It was blending my, US background and everything that means, me growing up here, not in London. So I don't have like, I didn't grow up with jungle and drum and bass and garage and all like this deep scene. I grew up with hip hop and soul and funk music and things like that and jazz, which are and have been included within drum and bass, but not in a way that I approached it. So it was something different that seems familiar. You know, it was blending the two into a new context, you know? And that's kind of what I feel is the most important thing if I were to summarize the rest of this episode in one poorly written out sentence. Our idea is that it's you and what you want mixed with whatever you're trying to fit in is, and trying to find a balance. So like, I'll kind of outline where I'm going to go with this before we get going, but to fit in but sound different, I feel like there's kind of like 3 steps with an additional 4. Maybe let's go there. So the first thing you need to do is really listen and engage in the music you're trying, in the scene you're trying to infiltrate. You want to become a part of. Like, just wanting to do something and making stuff, you're already a part of it. Don't feel like you have to be really good to be considered or pay your dues, or that stuff is like old head crap and it's very gatekeepy. Like, you do need to take your time and really grow and learn about like a certain scene. So, you know, you can feel like through that knowledge and that exploration, you will come to feel accepted and you will be accepted by others. Whether they like you or not is a different thing, but you are a part of a thing with which you engage in and you know, engage in. Yeah. And then secondly, the second point is know yourself, know what you want, what you are trying to accomplish, you know? Like, do you have a sound? Do you have an idea of a sound that you're working towards? Is it one of those like, my ideas are here, but my technical facility is down here, so I'm working up there? Because that's something we all go through. Like I said before, but like I said it before in a certain way, but like I couldn't make Mumbles of Grace until I made it. You know, I had to find all those steps of learning how to do certain things and working on my composition skills and things. And all that led up to making that tune, which is like arguably the tune I'm known for, next to before Breaking News was a thing, before these new tunes were a thing, you know? Like, I couldn't make that until I learned everything up to a point where I could, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's like a previous video. I wish I could say which one it was, but anyway, some long-winded like this usually is. And then, but the third point is, once you figure out what it is you're trying to get into and what it is you want to do yourself, it's finding a blend between those two. And it takes a lot of experimenting to find a good mix. You know, not every flavor mixes with the next one, but certain amounts of a certain flavor mix with certain amounts of another. It's kind of like a weird concoction, an alchemy of things coming together to make something new or make something different. Like, it's not hard to be different from a technical standpoint. If someone goes left, you go right. If someone uses this kind of drums, use a different kind of drums. That's already different in a sense, very basic, but different in a sense. So kind of following that pathway, it's like, okay, this is what people normally do. Let me try something a little adjacent and a little more adjacent to that adjacent. And then maybe you'll get something completely left field, which is wildly different, or you'll have something that's feels like this more or less standard and accepted thing, but is a bit to this direction, you know? That's what I try to do with my tunes, is very much like, it makes sense within drum and bass, but there's not a lot to compare it to because of the way I took it and the context I moved it towards, you know? Which is wholly personal to me, because all these steps, the listening and engaging, the figuring out what I want, and the mixing of the two is something I've done. And it's not like a one and done thing. It's constantly evolving because your taste constantly evolves, trends constantly evolve. What is in vogue or acceptable is constantly involved. And you can either follow and adhere to those trends, or you can follow and turn into something that's you. You know, you're still mixing yourself, you putting yourself into the music, you know? Does that make sense? This is long-winded enough. Again, these are just ideas. It's just my point of view. If you disagree, agree, I'm all for it. Again, comments. I'm up for this as usual. How do you yourself, I imagine you create something. If you're listening to this, or you just like the sound of my voice, and thank you. I really work on it. I'm a little sick, as you can tell. I'm coming down from a cold. The last episode was full of coughs, and that was only an hour ago. But, you know, this was a week ago within published podcast world. But yeah. And then a fourth, like, additional thing you could do, or it's the only thing you could do, honestly, is just ignore everyone and do whatever you want to do. But that takes, I mean, like anything, it takes guts, it takes courage, because like just ignoring people can go one of a couple ways. Like, you can ignore and be unique in a way that no one cares for, or you can ignore everyone, stick to your values or the things you want to do, really execute those ideas at a high level, and then come out the other side as, whoa, this guy's the innovator. He's changing things, like completely ignoring and bucking the trends and coming out with something that's uniquely themselves. Like, I feel like someone who, and this is kind of a cop-out answer almost, but someone who just ignores everyone. And at this point, why not? Caliber, like Caliber's going to Caliber and not care about what anyone else is doing, from DJing to producing to whatever. Like, he is 100% just going to do what he wants to do. And I say that not knowing him, but having, you know, observed and read the few interviews he does and things like that. Like, he's going to be himself. And that's kind of what I like to model myself after. Is just, in a sense, is just, at the end of the day, I have to be happy with whatever I make. So I'm just going to do my thing, you know, with varying mixes to, again, what's trendy or what's acceptable, or varying. Like, I'm very much doing my thing now, but it took me a while to get to this point. So let's dive into these couple stages, if you will. Again, if you like this, if it seems like something up your alley, go for hit that follow button, share with your friends, anyone. I know it's a very niche thing, these like topics I love to talk about, but I know they're for someone. And whenever you listen to it, if it's not the right time, remember, you can always come back and listen to these when it is. Because I know, like, a couple years ago, not a couple years ago, but like 6, 7, 8 years ago, I wouldn't care about anything I'm talking about right now. But I'm in a different spot now. And all this stuff, like, is what I think about all the time. So, you know, just deep into the creativity. But anyway, so the first step of making room for yourself, trying to fit in while being different, which is the gist of the question that was presented. The first part, again, is listen and engage. Listen. I know a lot of people don't like necessarily listening to the thing, music that comes out of the scene they're trying to be a part of. So, like, a lot of drum and bass producers don't listen to drum and bass, like, in their free time, because, you know, you feel as if you are going to absorb that with what you hear, and that's going to influence what you make. And honestly, you're 100% right. It probably does to a certain degree. But some people, it's like, oh, if I hear this, I'm just going to make that because my brain can't do anything else. And some are like, oh, if I hear this, it's just kind of like, it's passive, you know, and it doesn't really affect. And I'm kind of, I differ. Sometimes it's like, if I listen to a lot of Workforce, as soon as I try to open up a project and make something, even if I'm not thinking about it, like subconsciously, I'm like very clear, hard hitting drums, a ton of groove, bass, and, you know, what Workforce is known for. And I love his music, and I'm like a massive fan and an admirer of his. I've talked about it before. So, but I don't really want that to have an influence. Like, I can kind of dial back how much something like influences me, but I'm not talking about me right now. Anyway, listening and engaging. So you're really listening to the music, to get an idea of what's there now. Like, what is the current trend this year, last year, year before, because it kind of all blends together, of drum and bass. And consider that. Listen to older tunes, mixes, things like that to get an idea of what things were like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15, 20, learn what's there, learn what was there, what is there in current, and then start thinking about what's not there, Like, what does drum and bass, is it missing, or what kind of direction musically has it not explored yet? And there's a lot. There's no right answer. It's just like this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing. For me, it's like groove, like a certain kind of groove and a certain kind of like outside influence, and digging into hip hop and stuff, like in a way that I'm trying to do. It's like, no, hip hop's been like, and sampling and that kind of culture, has been around since drum and bass has been around, because, it really like golden age of hip hop, 90s basically, and Jungle being born, 90s is like around the same thing. And, yeah. So it's not like I'm doing anything wildly different, like the North Quarter exists, obviously. But again, it's finding that context of what one little thing hasn't been there. And that's like the feel I'm going for. But yeah, you consider like the trends, like what's trendy, like techie, critical sound is kind of trendy. Foghorns have been trendy. Foghorns, more or less, that's kind of a catch-all term, if you know what I mean. Fluffy, personal opinion coming in, boring, kind of mid-sounding liquid, which is just being rehashed. But that's not really the established producers doing that. It's more like the newer mid-tier, you know what I mean? I've talked about it before. And I, again, am not excluding myself from this category of people, by the way. That's the thing. Dance floor has always been kind of what it is. That kind of exists in its own thing of like, and well, just the trends, right? So let's say I want to fit into one of those trends. I could just straight up be derivative and just do what's been done, follow, like find a little blueprint, Every liquid tune has a nice pad with chorusy things and a think break and maybe a little hot pans, kind of a boomy kick. Am I going like focus, liquid? That's all I'm gonna say there. Or am I going like integral, whatever, like Dawn Wall, artificial intelligence-esque liquid? And that's its own like little niche within drum and bass, opinions aside, is very much like a specific kind. I can, be derivative and fit into that little pocket. But again, we're talking about being different. So to be different, again, it's not a crazy, big, huge step to the left or the right. It's just seeing what's there, considering what's not there, and just doing the thing that's not there. And taking that idea and trying to execute it at a high level, or at I want to say a high level, not meaning like you're the best or an expert. It's just like, don't like halfway do the idea, because a halfway idea will not come across whether people like it or not, or will not come. You know what I'm saying? Like if you do something halfway, it's going to sound like it's halfway. But if you really commit and try and, explore and execute it as best as possible, then it'll come across as a strong idea that people can appreciate for what it is, whether they like it on a personal level or not. Hopefully. That's kind of what I try to get through. Because like, not to derail, it's kind of related, but like Goldie said in an interview, and I this is kind of what drives me and what I like to, what I make and what I think as I'm making things, is a good idea will stand the test of time. I'm pretty sure he said that like verbatim. And that like, for me, that's what drives me and leads me to do something different and really think about the things I'm doing. Because everyone has the idea, and whether it's good or not is, it's subjective. But the thing is, if you have an idea and you see it through to the end and you do and try and execute it as best as possible, what you're left with, more often than not, is something that's timeless, more or less, like a good idea, I truly believe, a good idea will stand the test of time. Meaning that in 5, 10, 20 years, if it was a good idea now, then or later, 20 years from now, it'll still be a good idea because you went the distance to make it into what it was. Now, if it's a good idea that you didn't execute as well as you could, be it maybe on a technical level you couldn't, or on a musical level, something like that, then that leaves you room for improvement. Again, it's not like, boom, different, I'm the greatest. It's like stages. Okay, that's a little different. I tried that. Don't like that. I kind of like this. Let's keep the thing I like. Next time, iteration, iteration, iteration. And after a few of those, boom. Like the ideas I talk about and put into my tunes, like they don't just happen like one and done. Like there are stages. Like compare the 3 EPs I put out on Hospital so far, the Sandalwood Nights, Breaking News, and Now Thinking of You. Like there's a progression, but there's a progression coming from the first Sandalwood Nights to Thinking of You, and it's all there. Everything, like the techie drums were in the Sandalwood Nights EP. Which track would that be? None of them really, actually. So kind of, if I'm going for like techie, sort of groovy drums, you got Supermarket 64, which is the Breaking News EP. And then the parallel to that in Thinking of You is Green, Gray, Blue. They're actually about the same drums, but I refined them, did some more things groove-wise and arrangement-wise and sound palette-wise that elevated them to the way, like, I'm 100% like, the drums in Green, Gray, Blue are like probably the best I've ever for my skill set and like what I want to do. That's like peak right now. It's like peak me, peak my ideas, peak execution. Not to say any of the other ones aren't, because Thinking of You, I'm still kind of working on those. And those drums came from like 2 other ideas that have just been iterated. And I'm getting close to like nailing that sound. But the drums on Green, Gray, Blue are just like, they're as close to perfect for me as I can do. And that again is finding what I like. Techie, minimal drum and bass style drums, a little bit more percussive, a lot of space in between. Really, you can feel the groove. It's the silence between the notes. That's jazz, that kind of idea. And then taking my influences and taking my, the things what I want to get across and blending the two, finding a mix again, like I talked about, and then executing that idea through iterative, I'm using too many big words, iterative stages until I nail what I want, and that's Green, Gray, Blue. So again, it's to recap, because I'm kind of all over the place. I want to keep this concise, more or less. 20 minutes into this is listening and engaging. Be a part. I almost said an inside joke none of you are going to get, but if my students are listening to this, and I don't know why you would be a part of the orchestra. They'll know what it means. But be a part of the scene and actively engaged in the scene which you are trying to contribute to. Be that from an artwork perspective or videos, or it doesn't just have to be music. If you're an artist, a visual artist, comic books or comics, online comics, like look at other people who make those. Look at the scene around that. Be a part of that. Engage in it. That way you know what's going on, what's trendy, what isn't trendy, what happened, what will happen, what might, that kind of thing. And then you could think from there about what, again, the next step is what you want, your sound, your idea, your art style, whatever the corollary is, and blend the two. So like first step again is of trying to fit in while also being different. First step was listening and engaging. Second step is figuring yourself out and what you want. Once you know what you want, there's nothing anyone else can really tell you, Like if you are if you really think about what it is you want and you work towards that, like there's There's no distractions. It's like, I want this. This is what I'm going for, and I'm going to do it. This is not to say you're not going to reevaluate things throughout that quest. Let's call it that. But you know where you're going, and you know that whatever you do is leading you towards that point. And there's a lot of points in this journey, Again, if we're talking about iterations and constantly reevaluating each step, you're going to make it to this point, and then this point, and then this point, and this point. And overall, your end goal, which isn't necessarily the end of the road, but it's just the end goal until you think of the next one. Hopefully you've reached that. You've accomplished that. Okay. So really think about yourself, figure out what you want from like a very personal, grounded, like, who am I? I'm Duncan, and I like music, and I like this. Or specific, like, I'm trying to make drum and bass music, and I like this thing and this thing and this thing within drum and bass, and I wish this existed. So what you're working towards or what off of is those, let's say for this example, those 3 things you like about it, and that 4th thing you wish was there. And you got to try to blend those 2 into one thing, which is you, your sound, your song or songs, And that also takes time. But it comes from looking within, manifesting, you know what I mean? But it comes from taking time, experimenting in the studio, trying to, and then just really being, like thinking about, again, what you want. Like if you want techno style bass lines at 174 with drum breaks, do that. Try it. Just first off, like drums, bass line, stick them together. Probably won't work, but then you'll start figuring out the little intricacies. Because again, back to the food analogy, a bunch of this flavor doesn't necessarily mix with a bunch of this flavor, but a little bit of this flavor might mix with a little bit more of this one. Then you bring something else in, and that concoction of flavors, in this analogy, concoction of influences, hopefully turn into a dish best served on the dance floor at 174 BPM, clanged with another tune probably, because that's just what kids do these days. But if you're following what I'm saying, figure out what you want. And that way you have a direction to move in, And then once you combine, the next step would be to combine figuring out what you want and the way the scene is and has been, in a sense, and experimenting with crossing both, The scene, drum and bass. We're talking about drum and bass, but just consider yours. Again, what's there, what isn't there, what's trendy, what isn't trendy, what's like accepted, what's not accepted, why wasn't it accepted, was it an idea that wasn't executed properly? Can you execute it properly and bring it up, Do you want this certain thing? I really love polka music. This is an analogy, by the way. I'm okay with it, personally. I really love polka music, and I really love foghorn rollers. How can I blend the two? And then you work on blending that. You experiment till you find a good mix. And there's no like checklist that says this is a good mix, this is not a good mix. You need a little bit more pa, you need a little bit more blah, you know what I mean? It's just something you figure out until you personally care. And if you want, you can bounce ideas off other people. Sometimes they'll get them, sometimes they won't. I don't. It's like sometimes when I think I'm just a little too weird or out there with my ideas, like the early versions, not like the finished, the ones you hear, but like the ones I'm still working on. I'm like, maybe I don't want to send this to anybody, because more often they're just like, I don't get it, or give me something that like doesn't help. You know how feedback can be. Sometimes you can nail it, and then sometimes people just don't even read your question and just tell you what you need to do. Because what you should do is, but shout out Discord inside joke. If you want to join the Discord, perfect time for me to talk about it. Patreon.com/WinslowXYZ. Join Bad Snares Anonymous. Yeah, I've talked about it a ton. If you're let's put it like this. If you've ever been in a Discord and you know how those go, it's not like that at all. It doesn't just divulge in a stupid post and memes, and it stays focused. We're all creatives within and around drum and bass and music and stuff like that. And we're all focused on just getting better and the community aspect of helping each other out and growing as creatives, musicians, all that kind of thing. And I'm like really proud and like happy to say like it hasn't turned into one of those cesspool Discord servers, you know the ones I'm talking about. You do, like, that are just like internet culture and memes, and like there's a place for that, but there's also a place for like we're trying to do something and build something here. And like BSA is like an honest full thing. Like there's like 100 people in it, right? Members, but there's maybe like 20, 25 like active, let's call them card carrying BSA members that like are actively doing things, and that they're from like beginners to the hot shots on Hospital and Ram, and I'm just joking, you know what I mean? And like, so it's a spectrum of experiences and things, but the point is we're all working towards the same thing. We all have knowledge to share. Somebody who just joins and is just starting can easily tell me something I don't know simply because I'm not there like looking at those kind of things anymore that would give me that knowledge that I don't necessarily have, but they would, that kind of thing. So long-winded way, but if that sounds like something you would love to be a part of, and I would love for you to be a part of it, not just to have your couple of bucks on Patreon, but to be honest, like community and aspect, like follow that link in the show notes description. Join us. It's I'm happy to say no one has been like, I shouldn't have done that. I'm mad I joined this group of people who are like one of few who are actually like actively doing things as a community, because it's hard to start a community of people around anything without it like dipping into the nonsense that can be internet forum type areas and chat. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? So back to the topics. So we talked about weird. Again, if you're new here, this is kind of how things go. But trust me, it all ties together somehow. So yeah, again, we talked about fitting in while also being different. And this is any scene, but contextually for me in this episode is drum and bass. So those 3 steps, more or less. First step, listen and engage, be a part of the scene you're trying to contribute to. Second, figure out what you want to accomplish, what you want to do, what you would like to see within that space. And number 3, blend the two, experiment, try again until you accomplish what it is. And if you don't have the technical facility, work on that until you do. I mean, that's just it. Like kids can't walk until they crawl and fall and stand up and wobble around. And then when they walk, they can walk. You never have to worry about walking again unless you get hurt or something. Not wishing that on anyone. I'm just saying for story's sake, that's usually what happens, right? So again, if your technical facility isn't up there, just keep working on it. Do your things. Remember, iterative. Try something, reevaluate. Try something, reevaluate. Try something, reevaluate. That's how you get better. You can tell I'm a teacher, right? But I mean, I can't really talk to middle school kids like this because they're just like, Mr. Winslow, we don't care. I'm like, you don't. But I'm still going to tell you anyway because I love you. And I need you to be less dumb relative to how, you know what I mean? So yeah, those 3 steps, listen and engage, figure out what you want, blend the two, is basically like the foundation of innovating and trying to be different. Like if you think about like businesses who are trying to come up with and market a different product, like they have marketing researchers who research the demographic they're trying to sell to, the products that exist in that space, and they gather data It's more or less like, what do people like? What do they don't like? What sells well? What doesn't sell well? If it didn't sell well, was there something specific about it? Was it the marketing of it? Was it the design? Was it this? And then they, again, consider the thing they're trying to make and enter into that world, that space, their product. Your product is music or art or whatever. I know it's not a product, but in this analogy, it kind of is, okay? And you go from there and you consider both and how you can use what you know and what you research to, I was on a roll, wasn't I? You can use what you know and what you research to put that towards the creation of your thing that's interesting. Your thing is the music. Again, you research the old music, you know what that was, you know what things came from, and now you have your ideas about where you want to go and what you want to enter into that scene. And you blend the two in a certain way. It's not like a 50-50. Here's this and here's this and it should be great. No, it's like there's a little bit of both. Remember, a personal example is myself. I make what I want to make with respect to what happened before me and what happened around me. I ultimately want my music that is drum and bass to be considered and accepted as drum and bass. But I also want it to be known that is my interpretation, my style of drum and bass, which isn't wildly different to anyone else, but it's me. You know, when you see my name on something, it's going to sound like me and what I want to come across. I'm not going to make something that has nothing to do with what I like or what I sound like. I don't think I could make something that doesn't sound like me. You know, I don't think I can copy really well. I can. That's how I learned half the things I know. But ultimately, my process is you can give 4 producers the same break and they're all going to use it 4 different ways, you know, because they are them, and you know, everything that makes them is that kind of thing. I'm getting all off topic, but sort of, but so you consider what you want, blend in with what has been, and boom, you should come out the gate with something new. And again, you're constantly, oh man, camera froze. Ay. And we're back. Oh, camera shut off difficulties. Anyway. So again, do that and you should be golden after a while. It takes a lot of time, but anything worth doing is worth doing right and taking the time to do it. Sound like my mom. She was right. Let's go with that 4th option though. You can just ignore everyone and do whatever you want. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, if you just want to do something wildly different, you don't care at all, you don't want that outside input at all, go for it. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. I still feel like it's good to, you know, to listen and engage, know the scene you're trying to get into, but don't completely ignore that, but ignore that influence maybe. Ignore the trends and just do what you want to do. If you want to make drum and bass sound like this, go for it. And again, this is varying degrees. I'm not saying make sure you tick the box so people will like it and it's acceptable. I'm just saying know what it is you're getting into. For example, so many Americans, you hear one example of dubstep, let's say that, or one example of drum and bass, or whatever genre that Americans butcher. But some people, they will hear one and didn't just believe that's what it is, or completely ignore it for itself, for what it is, and then make this thing that's completely adjacent and then try and call it this thing. And I feel like that's the wrong way to go. Don't make jazz, samba, and then try to tell me it's Baroque music. You know what I mean? It's not. Like they might have like the same instrument. Cool, samba might have a little piano. Baroque might have a little early piano harpsichord kind of deal. That doesn't make it the same thing, you know? Just because you put 2 chocolate cookies and a little cream in the middle doesn't make it an Oreo. You know what I mean? That's not exactly the best analogy, but I was thinking about Oreos for some reason. The thing is, don't necessarily do that. Ignore it. And then when someone like inevitably be like, this isn't, in this case, drum and bass, don't be like, well, I don't care. I feel like that attitude is a little wrong. Like, if you're just like, nah, yeah, I know it's not like traditional drum and bass, but it's my idea of what drum and bass could be. Let's say that. And then that opens up a discussion and a kind of a dialogue of, all right, let's experiment, let's do something, but you could also do the whole ignore thing. Just, be aware. Like, I'm not going to just make put a 4/4 kick down in a project and make some bloops and call it techno. That's what my mom does. She's like, oh, like most people, like back in the day, it's like, oh, it's electronic sounding. It's techno. It could be, but then, you get like it's the iceberg. Everyone calls it techno, but under the water, it's like, but it's actually tech house music, techno, tech trance, progressive house, shrans, hard style, hard dance. It's, you know what I mean? So again, I feel like just be aware, but ignore those influences. Ignore them instead of embrace them and take them in. Ignore those influences and just make what you want to make. And you can still, like, if it's authentic to you, again, a good idea stands the test of time. If it's what you want, it's what you want to do, and you do it, and you execute that idea at a high level, no one can say anything to you. Nothing that will mean anything in any way. There's always going to be, again, the comments of this isn't this, and this isn't, and this is whatever. But they can't like knock you on a more objective level of, it's like, no, you had an idea. And while maybe everyone doesn't like it, the few people that do and that understand what you were trying to create are backing you. You did the thing you wanted to do at a high level. A good idea stands the test of time. Boom. There's no reason to be mad at that. But if it was like, again, you kind of half did it, but tried to pass it off as you went the full way, that's a little different, People can tell when you do something inauthentically. And I feel like as long as you do either of these things I'm suggesting, whether it's ignore or embracing, whatever, if you do it authentic to you, and it takes a while to figure out what that means, do it authentically. You can't go wrong. So, Audible2, at Audible2 on Twitter. I hope this answers your question about how you can make music that is original, but still fits into the scene. Fitting in while being different, making room for yourself where there's room to be had. Drum and bass is so small and so narrow in the grand scheme of things. There's so much room for people to do whatever they want to do. But you do have to go forth and do that thing. You have to try. And that's how things like Foghorns happen, because someone was like, I'm going to try and blah. And then here we are, 6,000 boring SoundCloud bootlegs later. There's the personal jabs you know me for. Anyway, as usual, this has been Winsnotes, episode 18. And want to keep up with me, the podcast, anything else, links in the show notes description. Hope this helped. And again, please leave comments, message me. My DMs are always open. I want to talk about these things because no one else is. So be sure to get back to me. Whether you agree, disagree, it's about the dialogue. If you want to join BSA, again, click the Patreon link in the show notes. And I'll see you there, or I'll see you somewhere else. And I might see you at a show because those are happening. I'll, again, keep everyone updated with the live stuff. Sunday Clangs on Sunday at 3 p.m. CST, Central Standard Time. Do your translation for whatever you are in the world. And until next time, Winslow. Wednesday is when this episode's coming out. So anyway. What's up, Winslow? Yeah. Later.